This is the first edition of Two Up Front, a general soccer show mostly focused about MLS. I'm Baxter Colburn alongside Simon Provan. Simon, how you doing today, sir?
I am doing great. Very excited to get on our way here with Two Up Front.
We are. It's been a long time coming, but we finally got it figured out. It was a little this, little that, timing schedules, all that other craziness, but we are finally here and we are excited to be here. Simon and I, good friends. We work together. We've done all kinds of fun stuff. But at the end of the day, Simon, we are true Major League Soccer fans.
Absolutely.
Now, I support the New England Revolution over in the Eastern Conference. They were just a small step away from winning last season, unfortunately. Kind of feel like the Buffalo Bills of MLS a little bit, unfortunately.
Well,
but
the Revolution have lost more MLS Cups than the
That's
Bills
true.
have
Thank
lost
you.
Super
Thank you
Bowls.
for that. I appreciate that. Way to start the show off with a bang. And you, who do you support, Simon?
Portland Timbers fan.
Okay.
Traveled out there a few years ago. I have a friend who lives out there. I got another buddy, and him and I were trying to do an MLS stadium every year. We kind of lost our momentum on that, but one of the stadiums we went to was when it was Geldwin Park still.
Oh,
that was
my.
Providence over in Portland, and man, I just fell in love with the club.
You have to, yeah.
You know, the club, obviously the Timbers Army, but also just what the club does in the community. So it's very easy for me to be a Timbers fan.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that at all. I know that you and I are, as much as our passion is the same, we come from totally different backgrounds
Yeah.
with soccer. You've been around since day one with Eric Winalda's goal. You remember seeing it, and for me, I'm pretty sure I was 3 when that goal was scored, so I don't remember the goal, unfortunately. I've watched it numerous times on YouTube and other forms of social media, but two different perspectives. That's why we love talking about this, though.
I was born when the NASL, the original NASL, was starting its slow death.
Oh, goodness.
The first World Cup I remember watching was 1990 World Cup. I think I watched the 86 World Cup, but I don't remember it.
Okay,
but the
fair
90,
enough.
When Bob Gansler, who was a Milwaukee guy, Jimmy Banks was on the team, who's also a Milwaukee guy. Of course, we're from Milwaukee, so
Yes,
that's
we
why I
are.
throw that in there. But yeah, I remember the U.S. doing quite well against Italy, getting killed against Czechoslovakia, and I think they played Austria. And I don't remember much from that one. But yeah,
I'm going to assume they probably lost or didn't get through too far after that point.
Right. So in other words, I'm the old man on the show.
You are. Not too bad, though. You've got the facial hair to prove it, too. It's unfortunate this is radio. But we're very excited to be here, though. There's a few different ways that people can check us out, Simon. We are on Facebook. They can find us at Two Up Front. That's all it is, the number 2, because there's two of us. Do you want to take a minute and explain the name? Because some people are probably going to hear Two Up Front and be like, what exactly does that mean? 'Cause
Absolutely.
You can take that a few different ways, really.
And that's the whole point. It should be taken a few different ways. Ways is what I'm trying to say. Well, we talked quite a while about what do we want to use for a name. We went through a bunch of different names, and we ended up with this one because it is a soccer term in that you sometimes use 2 up front in a 4-4-2 formation. But we also like the idea that we're not going to hold any punches. Just because we're big fans of MLS doesn't mean we're out there, spreading the gospel of MLS, if it were. I mean, we want to see the league grow.
As much as we'd like to,
Right.
but at the same time.
Our main thing is to call it like it is. So some people may say, hey, you're being unfair. Well, we're just up front. And I guess maybe sometimes we will be 2 up front.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
that's for me, that's where the name comes from.
Exactly, yeah. No, that was a very big thing that we thought about a long time, because when it comes to naming a show, it's not something that you need to take lightly. A lot of people are like, oh, we're just going to call it this, we're going to call it that, but you and I we like to think about things a little bit more in depth than the next guy sometimes, and when it comes to a soccer show, we were able to dive in and really understand, why we chose our name. So remember, you can check us out on Facebook at 2 Up Front. We're also on Twitter at 2 Up Front Soccer. You can follow Simon on Twitter at Simon Provan, and then you can follow myself, Baxter Colburn, at Baxter Colburn as well on Twitter.
Maybe we should spell out our names. So
Probably
people
wouldn't
actually
hurt
know.
if you want to spell out yours
Sure,
for us.
Simon, as it always is, Simon, Provan, Provan. So at Simon Provan.
And then for Baxter Colburn, it is Baxter, And then COLBURN, the Q and Z are silent. I'm kidding. But I always love telling that to people, especially at legal offices, if I'm filling out documents and like, wait, what? I'm like, no, I'm kidding. That usually gets me in trouble. But anyway, enough about all the intros, enough about all the other fun stuff.
Well, we do need one more thing.
Do we?
Yeah, we need to.
Okay.
We're not going to talk much about EPL or other leagues on the show, but we'll touch on it. So
we will, that's right.
So we should throw out there that I am a Everton fan, and let me just say it's been a very painful season. I hope they just stay focused on Europa League. For myself, it's one of those deals where maybe it's a bit heretical, but they're doing terrible in the league. And let's face it, the highest they can probably finish is about 12th. So 12 to 16, it doesn't matter. So focus on Europa League. Make sure you stay up in the league. But go get that trophy in Europa.
As long as you don't get relegated, right? That's all you really care about at the end of the day.
At this point, that's it.
That's not a bad problem to have, though. I mean, not getting relegated, which is weird, and we can talk about EPL more in depth at another time. My EPL roots stem from my good friend Andy. He is from London, and he is the reason I sort of kind of follow Arsenal.
All right.
As growing up, I mean, you play FIFA as a kid, and you choose Manchester United or Chelsea, all the big-name teams. But my friend Andy came over. I first met him maybe 5 to 7 years ago, and he's like, you should check out Arsenal. I'm like, I'd never heard of him. I'm like, okay, Thierry Henry, he was a thing, I think, back in the day. So yeah, that I follow him on and off. I will identify if asked, who do you support? I will say Arsenal. But I'm also a fan of the underdogs. I love when the little guys go up and beat on Manchester City and all those other storybook seasons. But if I ever do get to England again, I did go once, didn't get a chance to go to a game, but I definitely want to check out the Emirates. I've heard it's a beautiful stadium and definitely want to get to a game.
You know, I was in England when I was 15, so I'm not even going to allow people to do the math. It was a while ago. I was able to go see Coventry City and Aston Villa at Villa Park. So that was when Coventry was, I believe it was the first year of the Premier League.
Wow.
So Coventry was there, and what the cool thing about it was Roy Wegerle, who was he could have been playing for South Africa or the U.S. He chose the U.S., so I actually did get to see a U.S. player play over there.
Look at that.
Back in the day.
Back before
in the
Clint
early
Dempsey,
90s.
Tim
That's
Howard, all those guys migrated over
Yep.
there. All right. Well, the first thing we want to talk about is a positive thing. We're not going to be a negative tone on the show. We don't want to come off as two guys that are just going to
rail against everything.
Exactly. We don't. It's not our style. We're not that kind of people. We are a little too upfront occasionally. Ha, see what I did there. But anyway, the Champions League, not UEFA Champions League, the American version of that.
Yeah, CONCACAF Champions League.
Exactly. Something that doesn't get a lot of press usually, but the team that did the absolute worst in Major League Soccer in 2014 is doing the best, which is a little strange if you think about it, and kind of makes me question what happened last year.
Well, I think part of that is the whole MLS works differently from other leagues in many respects, and one of those is they give more money to the teams who finish bottom of their conferences, bottom of the whole league. So that helps. That means they can actually get more players. But, man, that was pretty exciting for Montreal Impact.
Yes, the Montreal Impact winning on aggregate based off of away goals.
Exactly, yep. 3-3 aggregate. They went down to Pachuca. Not an easy place to play.
No, definitely.
They're in preseason. But they were so smart. What they did is they went down there, instead of doing all these tours for preseason or playing tournaments up here, they trained in Mexico for 2 weeks.
Wow.
At altitude. So they were ready for that game. But it did start to show in the 60th minute or so in that game when Pachuca started to come back. And the game went from Montreal being up 2-2 to end up tying. Or, I'm sorry, they were up 2-0, then ended up tying 2-2. But those two away goals were so huge.
Exactly.
Because in Montreal, they were losing 1-0 due to a penalty kick in the 80th minute. Looks like they're going to be out. Very disappointing. But then a fantastic pass in the 95th minute, basically 10 seconds to go. Wonderful chest down. You've got the names of the players. Sorry, I'm a little bit behind here. I just watched this. I watched all the highlights. Anyways, Callum Morris. Malice, just a fantastic pass from past midfield all the way near the box, and Porter chests it down beautifully, puts in the goal, and Montreal ends up going on to the semifinals of the CONCACAF Champions League.
Yeah, and it was the funny thing about the play, though, is that the pass itself isn't getting as much attention as it should. It was about a 60-yard pass in the air, perfectly placed onto the chest of, was it Porter you said that scored the goal? Yeah, I mean, it was a terrific individual effort from Porter as well to chest the ball down, muscle off the defender, and then finish right-footed into the corner of the net. But That pass, though, 60 yards is impressive within itself, and I think, obviously, if that pass doesn't happen, that goal doesn't get scored, we're talking about Montreal being another team that disappointed yet again. The usual media that centers around, Montreal.
And the highlights, like I said, I was watching. One of the great things was seeing over 38,000 people there cheering on the Impact. Great atmosphere. And that's one of the knocks that the CONCACAF Champions League still gets, is not many people end up showing up to these games. Now, Montreal, when they were still a minor league team, actually did quite well, making it all the way into the quarterfinals. But the first Canadian team to eliminate a Mexican team in the CONCACAF Champions League. And, of course, they're an MLS team, so anybody who's an MLS fan has got to get behind that.
Exactly. Regardless, whoever you support on a daily, weekly, yearly basis, the fact that Montreal, little Montreal as it were, I mean, they were the worst in the Eastern Conference last season and in MLS as a whole, but the fact that they were able to pull that exciting of a finish out of almost nowhere really speaks highly of them, and maybe might be a team to keep an eye on going into next season. However, though, tradition seemed to stay with a familiar team in the Eastern Conference, DC United, as they were knocked out on aggregate, similar to what occurred to them in the 2014 MLS playoffs as well.
Yeah, so they go down to Costa Rica, end up losing their first game 5-2. So what a mountain to climb now. They have to at least put in 3 goals. They ended up losing last night 2-1, and really even that score was not indicative of the actual game. It was basically a 1-1 draw. They got a PK there at the end. But Ben Olsen, head coach there, had said that him and his team have to learn from this. They can't keep going into their first legs, putting up an egg or just doing terrible, and then coming back and trying to play from behind from the get-go of the first whistle of the second leg.
Exactly. Yes, it might make for more exciting soccer if you're a fan, because it gives you an opportunity to really watch nonstop soccer action, because okay, our team needs to score goals, but it puts you in a bigger hole and makes you really suffer as you try to figure out exactly what needs to get done, and it's way too much pressure to put on a team, especially 3 goals. 1 goal, I understand. You go down a goal, 1-0 or 2-1 away, on away goals. Okay, that happens, but 3 goals is a hard deficit to overcome.
It's simply, you got to set yourself up for success in the second leg. That's what it comes down to. And, some people would say, it'd be better to have a 3-game series like we do in American sports. And I definitely see some merit in that. At the same time, it's nice to see traditional football rules being applied to the North American game as well.
Exactly, yeah. And it's something that moving forward, I'm sure that we'll see more teams, because traditionally MLS teams have not had that good of success when it comes to Champions League play. It would be nice to see them make a decent run. So now I feel like if you are an MLS fan, you have to get behind Montreal and you have to support them. Like I said, regardless of wherever your loyalties lie, even those Timbers and Revolution fans as you and I are, we have to get behind Montreal because their success in this tournament now is huge for the league.
Absolutely. When Real Salt Lake made it to the 2011 final against Monterrey, it was great to see all these MLS fans come out and support that team. They almost had it. Would have been fantastic. And for those of you who don't know, what's on the line is a berth in the FIFA Club World Cup.
Which no MLS team has ever made it to, correct?
Correct. We've had a couple of MLS teams win the old Champions Cup. And the first year that they were supposed to have the FIFA Club World Cup, LA would have been there. But the European and South American confederations had a big problem with how the Club World Cup was going to be set up. So eventually what happened is they came to a compromise. Well, that year they shut it down. They weren't going to do it. They eventually came to a compromise a couple of years later in which the South American and European teams would start in the semifinals. So it gives them a clear path to the championship. But we've seen some European and South American clubs get knocked out. But here we sit, Montreal now, a 2 series away from getting to that FIFA Club World Cup. Yeah,
which would be amazing if they do make it that far. In complete honesty, I mean, if you asked me to name 5 Montreal players in a life or death situation, I probably couldn't. Marco Di Vaio is the first name that comes to name.
Sure.
Is Troy Perkins still on the team, right?
Perkins, I'm not sure. This is terrible of us,
isn't
it?
I feel
well,
bad.
Hey, it's preseason. We don't know.
Exactly. We don't know exactly who's even on the rosters at this point in time.
Let me pick that up right there about this preseason, though. That obviously it's a big handicap to have the quarterfinals of the CONCACAF Champions League happen during the MLS preseason. MLS only has itself to blame for that because of the calendar that they use. At the same time, you can't blame them for the calendar they use because you can't be playing all these games in January and February in the northern states. At the same time, what Montreal showed us is that does not have to be an excuse. You can still be effective in the CONCACAF Champions League if you prepare yourself properly, and that's exactly what the Impact did.
Yep, and with a player, like we said, we talked about Cameron Porter just a smidge, and he was the man that scored the game-winning goal. He's younger than I am. I mean, not that I'm very old, but even I'm 23, so the fact that a 22-year-old, he's 6'1", 175 pounds, he was able to put the weight of what are they, Montreal is not I mean, it's a city, but they're
it's more like a French province.
Yeah, a province. Yeah. There we go. I'm like, he put the province on his back, as it were, and pushed them through, and now they've got a very good chance of making some MLS history and CONCACAF history as well.
Absolutely. I love Frank Klopas' quote. He's the head coach. He had said he told the boys, God never sleeps.
There you go.
He told them to keep fighting and keep fighting. It's amazing that the two people who connected on that play were both subs.
Yeah, you had mentioned that talking before the show that they were both subs. The guy that made the long pass is from Milwaukee. He played at the University of Marquette. He was a Golden Eagle. And
Marquette University.
Marquette University, yes.
The only reason I correct you is my oldest brother Steve also played there for 4 years.
Exactly, yeah. So I can't necessarily say that the man that made the pass is the best player in school history, because you might question me and rival me on that and say your brother, which is you never know. Maybe you never know exactly with how a person makes an impact at a school. But Simon, are you ready to do your Simon Says segment?
I am, yes.
All right. Well,
should we do a quick explanation real quick?
Yes, please do.
So we're going to be doing 2 segments on the show, maybe every week. One is called Simon Says. That's where I'm going to take up any issue that I want. And in the next part of our show, you'll hear Baxter's Bash, in which that'll be Baxter's opportunity to jump in and speak about anything he wants. We're going to limit it to 30 to 40 seconds each, so it's purely our time to say what we want. Is that a good enough explanation?
That is true. I think 40 seconds is about is a solid time. Gives you plenty of time. There'll be, if need be, there can be a small rebuttal at the end, and then we usually go to a break after that. So with 40 seconds on the clock, good sir, on your mark, get set, go.
All right, so the Qatar 2022 World Cup. This is completely different from anything else we've been talking about on the show so far. Listen, it's being talked about being moved to winter from summer. I think most people think of it as a joke that it's even being held there. You can include me in that. But this whole thing about getting upset that it's being moved to winter, it's a smokescreen. These stadiums are being built by slave labor, people not allowed to leave the country, they're not getting paid. That is what should be most upsetting about the Qatar World Cup. Not because of the temperature, but because people are literally dying. Thousands of people are dying building these stadiums. That's why it's got to move.
Time's up. Wow, well done. It's almost like you practiced that at home in the mirror, I swear. A quick thing, isn't it Qatar?
You know what? I've heard Qatar, I've heard Qatar, I've heard Qatar.
Who knows?
I'm going with Qatar because that's what ESPN says.
Fair enough. So. They must be right, obviously. All right, well, we're going to take a fast break. When we come back, we're going to chat about all the craziness happening in Major League Soccer with the collective bargaining agreements. And also, we're going to shed a little light about the development of the USL. This is 2 Up Front. We will be back right after this short break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to another edition of 2 Up Front. I'm Baxter Colburn, joined by Simon Provan. We talked a lot about Champions League, not the UEFA, but the CONCACAF Champions League in our first segment. probably the most airtime that the Montreal Impact have gotten on a show in who knows how long, Simon, but never a bad time to talk about the Impact. They are making leaps and bounds for people for Major League Soccer as a whole, and it all kind of stems back, though, to the development leagues. A lot of teams in Major League Soccer now are adopting USL teams. They used to be USL Pro teams. Now they are just USL, United Soccer League, if you want to call it the second tier.
Third tier,
third tier, which is weird because these players are getting better shots at playing Major League Soccer than the guys in the second tier, which is the
NASL.
That's right. I wanted to make sure before I said the wrong thing and be like, no, that's not it.
That's where the old man experience
I
comes
appreciate
into
that.
play.
That's why we keep you on the show. That's why we pay you the big bucks, Simon. But USL, 24 teams.
24 teams, and 8 of which, if I counted that correctly, are owned by MLS teams. So a lot of them are using the name 2. For example, T2 is for Portland Timbers. We've got LA Galaxy Dos. I kind of like that whole Hispanic roll into there. But Vancouver Whitecaps FC2. But then you have teams like Real Salt Lake. They're going to call their USL team the Monarchs. Mm-hmm. So there's some creativity.
The Monarchs adds a whole nother spin to it. Toronto FC 2. You've got the Vancouver Whitecaps, too. So it's very obvious that the Cascadia region of MLS is big into the USL teams in development. We've seen certain guys get, loaned, as it were, to the USL team, and then they come back up and play later on in the season, or vice versa, depending on how their development works going forward.
And as a guy who has watched this league since day one, watched it go from no type of academy whatsoever to having a very bad reserve league. I don't know if you know this, Baxter, but there are stories of, in the old reserve league, in which they'd only play about 12 games, you'd have the guys on the bench playing in these games before the main match. But a lot of times they couldn't field a whole team, so the trainers would come out and play. They would have some media members come out and play once in a while.
It was just a Sunday pickup league, basically.
Basically what it was.
Holy cow.
It's so exciting to see the development in the academies and having these players loaned out to USL clubs where they're not just getting games in, they're getting game experience.
Exactly, and that's the big thing, especially if you look at a guy like, one name that comes to mind is for LA Galaxy Dos is Bradford Jamieson IV. He's a young 17-year-old striker that has really started to get some good experience. He was signed by the Galaxy last year out of their academy, a homegrown player, but he's only 17, and now he's trying to get a lot of featured minutes with LA Galaxy Dos, and I think that could be a good beneficial thing. He might be the next, Giassi Zardes,
who also spent time in USL,
exactly.
LA Galaxy Dos.
So it's really working out so far for the Galaxy and potentially the U.S. national team as well, depending on how Zardes' development continues, not only this season, but he did get a small stint with Jurgen Klinsmann and the Yanks.
Absolutely, and I think we'll see a lot more of him as well. I thought he did quite well.
Yes, I completely
agree. Saw him up there. Another exciting thing is, again, you got 24 teams in the USL, and they're going to be really focused on regional competition. So the reason I say that's exciting is, again, growing up, and we still see soccer teams fold like crazy. Or not like crazy, but when I was growing up, teams would be here for a year, then they'd be gone.
Yeah.
By having this many teams and being able to focus on regional play, they don't have to spend so much money on travel anymore.
Exactly, which is a beautiful thing, because even with sports leagues in America, America's not as big as China, whatever, but even the reason I think teams in England stay together so much is because England's not a very big thing. So if you have to
take
travel,
buses everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You travel from the south to the north, well, that's whatever, a 2 or 3 hour bus ride. It's not the end of the world. In the U.S., you have to fly across time zones to play. If the Revs are playing Portland, it's going to be a bit of a trip to go do that because there's a lot more space. And
think about Seattle going down to Orlando.
Ooh, they are not going to like
and
that.
And vice versa. That's the longest.
Or is it? What about Vancouver? Isn't Vancouver?
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Yes,
Vancouver to Orlando.
Yeah.
I wonder if they did that to them. We'll have to check that out or not this season. But I wonder if they were cruel to Vancouver and sent them down there this year.
Yeah.
But USL continuing to be a league that people are starting to take notice. It's also where potential expansion teams into Major League Soccer are getting talked about. Obviously, the Sacramento Republic FC is a big name that continues to keep coming up. People thought that would be the new team, not LAFC or even Atlanta. We kind of had a feeling Atlanta was going to be there. The Atlanta Silverbacks. That still will be an extension of it. They're going to be not a USL team. They're either NASL or they're like a fourth tier team.
Well, to be honest with you, we'll see what happens with the Silverbacks. They're league owned right now. Their owners that were there backed out of the team after Atlanta MLS got approved. So we'll see what happens with the Silverbacks. Now, I do want to say, based off of what you said earlier, mistakenly thinking they were the second tier,
yes,
they are going to be applying for a Division II status.
USL is?
USL is.
It makes sense, though, because there's way more ties to the third division for Major League Soccer than the NASL. You hear how many? I don't know if there's any NASL teams that really are linked to an MLS team.
No, not at this time. Although we've had a couple of teams make the jump from NASL to MLS. I believe Montreal, if I remember correctly, was
think you're
NASL.
right, yeah. Along with that, too, you almost look at a team like Minnesota United FC, who is also rumored to possibly be that last expansion team. Minneapolis, the Vikings, they're building their new glass atmospherics, whatever they're kind of doing there. They're all glass stadium.
But the Minnesota market, it's a great example of where soccer has come in this country. You actually have two ownership groups vying
they want
for
them.
that.
They want them, the Twins and the Vikings, right?
Absolutely. And they're not working together on that. Now, you can argue that they should, but
it makes sense.
But it's pretty amazing that in this day and age, we have two ownership groups in the same city fighting for that MLS team.
Which is good to see, because I think it's a problem that the league never thought it would have.
Absolutely.
It's be like, oh, wait, you want, oh, okay, well, cool. We can kind of maybe work this out or see who's willing to give us more money, because that's ideally what it's going to come down to at the end of the day. If there's one other team, Simon, that is looking to kind of make that jump, it's kind of a tie between either Louisville City FC, and then that team down in St. Louis FC. St. Louis has been, I feel like, as long as I've been following MLS, well, at least over the last 2 or 3 years, St. Louis has always been just poking, just a small little poke, just like, hey, we'd like a team down here.
I don't think St. Louis will happen, though.
And I don't think so either.
But here's why, is there was a gentleman named Jeff Cooper that was really pushing to get into MLS, and he started some minor league teams down there. They both folded. So people were pushing for him to get an MLS team, and that's definitely a case where the league knew more about him than any of us fans did. I think it's Sacramento for sure, and I think Minneapolis is going to get there.
Do you want another team in California, though?
If they can get supported, California's a big state. Do I want another team in California as a fan? No.
I think the Midwest needs more teams, personally.
There's got to be that support. That's the key.
Exactly. And obviously that's what it'll come down to. That's why, the East and West are just loaded with teams, because that's where all the support is. Those are the bigger cities.
But then you look at Sporting Kansas City.
Yeah.
I mean, look what the turnaround they did since they were the Wizards. The Crew is doing some exciting things.
The Columbus Crew. Chicago Fire is slowly working their way back into that. Not as the same. They're not as dominant as they were even back in the mid 2000s to early 2000s. With guys like Brian McBride running around on the field for them, even Chris Ralph back in the day. But yeah, Chicago is, I think, behind if you had to do with a 3-team. Obviously, Sporting is that first team, then Columbus, then Chicago.
And you got a lot of Fire fans just upset with the ownership down there. Kind of an absentee owner, so I understand that as well. I agree we need more teams in the Midwest, but it still has to start with that support.
Yeah, I kind of laughed because there were rumors for a while that Detroit wanted a team. I'm like, Detroit has their own issues economically as a whole. They do not need to worry about trying to add a professional soccer team. That's great and all that to kind of bring the Midwest together makes me think of the NFC North. In football, you've got the Packers, Lions, Bears, and Vikings. Like, if you got 4 MLS teams in that general vicinity, I think it would certainly do the league some good. But at the same time, like you said, the followership, that's what really comes down to. And that's why I don't think Wisconsin's ever going to get a professional soccer team for MLS. They've got the Milwaukee Wave.
Yeah,
but that's indoor soccer.
Right. And
not to take anything away from that.
Sure. What I will say is I do think the support could be there for Milwaukee. Not to make this all about Milwaukee right now, but the city council has made some incredibly confusing moves, I will say. I'll say it kindly.
Good choice of words. I was like, where's he going to go?
Very confusing moves. For example, let me just say,
Please.
For those of you in Milwaukee, at one point in time, Peter Wilt wanted to get a stadium built where the Park East Freeway was shut down. And one of the city council members said, there will never be a professional soccer stadium on that piece of land over my dead body. Well, we're looking at 10 years later, nothing has been built on that parcel of land.
Is that guy dead now? Or is he? I was wondering, I'm like, is he actually alive or dead? Or what happened with him there? But yeah, I remember writing an article, I think about almost a year ago now, about if MLS were to bring a team to Wisconsin, where it would go. you can't build an independent. Well, there's partnerships that you can't ignore. Milwaukee, the Brewers, you have to, or the Bucks. Obviously, you got to talk about with them. Madison, well, the Badgers maybe a little bit. They're not the best soccer team for college, but Madison's the capital, and then Green Bay with the Packers. Now, I think it would have to be between Green Bay and Milwaukee. If you put a team anywhere, you can maybe start that rivalry with Chicago.
Sure.
Columbus is just down the road as well. But at the same time, it's Green Bay Packers first, the rest of the whatever happens in the state second.
Absolutely.
And I don't think any team could ever compete with that, even if they did partner with the Packers organization.
Yeah, I don't think you can compete with the Packers at all. I think you kind of let that beast be the beast that it is. And let's be honest, that's a pretty awesome beast.
Oh, it's an amazing beast. No disrespect to the Packers at all. I mean, it's like I said, though, it's hard to really know if Milwaukee or Wisconsin as a whole would ever be able to support fully a Major League Soccer team. Maybe
Sure.
down the line, Don Garber wants to get us to 24 teams, and then after that, is that enough? Do we do promotion relegation? Then there comes in all that other stuff after a while.
Right. That could be it. We could have a whole show on promotion
Exactly, yeah.
relegation. Now, going back to USL, we do have a team that's been announced in Milwaukee. It's not USL. They actually haven't announced what league they will be in. They're hoping to be a team in which they play in a professional league, though it sounds like they might be playing in an amateur league. So there's a whole lot of questions marks there. But perhaps that's a team that eventually can be a USL team, and we see what happens from there.
Exactly, yep. It'll definitely be interesting to see what happens with the development of the league. Now, Simon, there almost wasn't a league this year. There was
right.
a potential strike,
Yes.
the collective bargaining agreements. There was all these rumors that there's going to be a player strike. We aren't going to have a season for maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks. And then last night, as I'm crawling into bed thinking, well, what the heck are we going to talk about on the show tomorrow because nothing is happening, then Twitter blows up. My phone goes crazy, and all of a sudden, the Players Union and Major League Soccer have reached an agreement, and I'd like to say all is well with the world. We're going to have a season, so yes, all is well with the world. Are the players fully happy? Yes and no. But the deal as a whole, give us a little bit of insight about that, Simon.
So obviously this one came down to the wire. The last one came down to 5 days before the season started. This one came down to the day before players were traveling. So it was really last minute. Players wanted full free agency, and I know you and I have different perspectives on this. And again, this comes from me having been through the end of NASL, having seen the game at least be rebirthed here with the First Division League, and seeing the careful growth that league had. But even before that, seeing how the league almost went under after its first 5 years.
Yeah.
Right, so they got a little bit of movement on the free agency. Granted, it's not much. Apparently, it only affects about 13% of the players in the league. So you have to be 28 years old with 8 years of service in the league in order to have free agency. Then with that, though, your raise as you go from one team to the next is going to be capped, and it's at certain increments. So we'll see anywhere from a 15% to 25% maximum raise that you can get as a player moving from one team to the next in the free agency market. Now, the big thing is, though, the players did get a form of free agency.
They did, which is helpful, though. I mean, it'll be something.
If you think about 20 years ago, free agency wasn't even a thought.
No, and
you
you even look at it now, even the last 10 years. I mean, yes, there's been small talks here and there, but even since I've been following the league, free agency has still been kind of a shh, we don't talk about
Absolutely. At the same time, the minimum salary, I think this is what I'd be most happy about if I'm a player. The minimum salary went from $34,000 a year, which is a joke, let's be honest,
that. It really is.
to $60,000 a year.
Not awful.
You know?
Not awful.
If you were to be told that, hey, we're giving you a $16,000 raise today, I'd be pretty happy with that.
I was going to say I would have no problem with that as well. Even granted, you being in the professional working world, me coming out of college, hearing, hey, we're going to pay you $60,000 a year instead of 34,000.
34.
Yeah, I'd be like, sure, sign me up. Not a problem.
And you think about the big thing with that is that probably allows these players, every player in the league, to let that be their full-time job. I mean, that's the crazy thing to me is that there were still players having to work second jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Not
though they're
a lot,
professional.
but something, though, to pay
Right.
bills. You have to.
Right.
I mean, obviously, soccer is a very demanding sport, so, yeah, you hear about guys working at local places in their community just to make a little extra cash on the side, or even, doing training with kids at high schools or even colleges as well, because they had to earn that money to pay their bills. Because that's great that you're making $34,000 a year, but if you've got a wife, if you've got kids, you've got a house, the normal things of life, you've got to pay for them somehow, and unfortunately, sometimes $34,000 a year is not enough to do that.
Now let's look at what the owners get out of this. We see what the players get out. We will see an increase in the salary cap. Reported figures are about 7% each year, which, let's be honest, Don Garber keeps talking about how he wants this to be the best league in the world by 2020. Well, you're looking at a salary cap in 2020 at about $4.2 million. You can't afford to be the best league in the world if your salary cap or salary budget is $4.2 million.
To put it into perspective, the NFL raised their salary cap this year to $148 million. Just to put that into perspective. And I find it funny, too, because when I first heard that that MLS player's base salary, like the minimum that you can make, is $60,000 a year, I went and I checked out the NFL. I think right now, the minimum you can earn is $500,000 a year. To be that fifth string kicker on the bench, basically, you'll never see the field, but you will make $500,000 a year, and they're pushing it to make it $1 million a year.
And now, of course, there are differences there. That's
obviously
the only truly professional league in the world to play American football.
Yes, of course. So that does make sense, obviously, but I'm just saying, just for a bit of perspective between American football and then soccer, it's like, whoa, it's like totally different spectrum.
Now, what's interesting is it looked like the players had everything in their court. 20th season, you got 60,000 fans coming to the Orange Bowl for the NYCFC. You've got a new TV contract. It was always confusing to me, too, to hear Don Garber talking about how the league's losing $100 million a year when you've got all this new money coming in from a TV deal. You got these clubs
paying...
Sounds like
poor money management on Garber's part, if anything.
$100 million coming in from these new teams. And on top of that, you've got SUM, which is their marketing arm, that made tons of money off of selling the World Cup rights. So SUM wouldn't be there if it wasn't for MLS. So to not include the income from SUM, I think is a bit disingenuous.
Yeah, and you look at Garber, and I don't want to make this go completely against Garber, but at the same time, as soon as I read his quote, or one of his quotes, after the deal was finalized, it was like you said, he keeps emphasizing, this is our 20th year, this is our 20th year. We filled the bowl, as it were, for NYCFC versus Orlando City, 60,000 fans, and he keeps highlighting that and highlighting that and highlighting that. Like you see him, like his first part of his quote, it says, "We are pleased to finalize the framework for a new collective bargaining agreement with our players." And then that's all he talks about with that. And then he's like, we now enter our 20th season with enormous momentum with our new television partners, like you mentioned, dynamic star players from the U.S., Canada, and abroad, and then talking about filling the bowl for NYCFC in Orlando. So, like, the agreement with the players doesn't even really get talked about much, and you can kind of see that's how little Garber cared about it.
Well, I'll say two things. First of all, he's the face of the league, so he's got to put a positive spin on anything.
Of course, yeah.
I heard a great quote. In labor negotiations, you know it's a good deal when both sides walk out upset. I think that pretty much sums it up. I will keep that in
mind for the future if I need that.
Because, again, think about it here, is that the players wanted free agency. You're kidding yourself if you thought they could get full-blown free agency. The owners had said free agency is a non-starter. Nothing will happen if you keep talking about free agency. Well, it's not so much what they got on the surface that counts. It's the deeper understanding. They got these owners to open up and give them some free agency. Another big thing, and this is a huge win for the players, the owners wanted this to be an 8-year CBA. Think about where the league was 8 years ago and where it is today. That would have been murder for the players. The players got them to make it another 5-year agreement, which means this is the start of the new TV contract. Just over halfway through this current TV contract, they're going to go through these negotiations again. So by that point, we'll have a real good feel of how the league is doing with its TV ratings, with how much money it's making off of games, off of sponsorships. So that gives the players yet another opportunity to break that free agency door even wider.
Yes. Yep. It gives them, like you said, that opportunity to really break open that door. And I really hope that they do harness this event and can really look towards the future and say, you know what? We had a good talk back in 2015. We had some good stuff there. We laid some good groundwork. Like you said, we got the foot in the door. But now that we've gone through all of this, the TV contract, everything, it's time we really start taking a better look at this. And who knows if Garber's going to be around in 5 years. I'd assume he would be. I'm assuming he's going to kind of do this until either some major scandal erupts or he just says, you know what, I'm done.
And I'll tell you what, for those people who like to harp on Don Garber, and there's quite a few people, they weren't around in the early days with Doug Logan.
Ooh, I don't even know who that is.
He was the first commissioner of the league.
Wow.
Let me tell you that he was the biggest joke as a commissioner of a soccer league. Don Garber came in. He made the hard decision to say we gotta close down 2 clubs. That was Miami and Tampa Bay. So we were down to 10 teams. The league was down to 10 teams. Look where the league is now. And it is, as much as he says the league's losing $100 million, it's in such a healthy state.
It really is.
It has surpassed where the NASL went to. Expansion, I think, hopefully will slow down after 24 teams because it needs to. We need that stability.
Yeah, you can't just start throwing teams out left and right.
Well, and it's not fair to these teams to have to keep putting up these players for expansion drafts. How, as a team, can you continue to build an identity if you're just having to keep getting rid of players?
Don Garber is almost playing Oprah for a little bit, like, hey, you get an expansion team, and you get an expansion team. You all get expansion teams. Like,
That's
no,
great.
you have to cut it at some point, and that's why I think 24 teams is a good number to stop it at. Now, obviously, you can't keep expanding the playoffs at that point in time either, which is ridiculous even this season, that it's 12 out of the 20 teams are going to make the playoffs.
Yes.
But we'll get into that in our next segment after the break and talk a little bit more about our conference previews and who our teams are that we think are going to make the playoffs. But, Simon, are you ready for me to do a little bashing?
Absolutely.
Now, I feel like the name of this being called Baxter's Bash is a little cruel, but I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to be a little too upfront, as it were. See what I did there? 40 seconds on the clock. Let me know when I'm ready to roll.
Here we go.
All right. So for my Baxter's Bash, my first one, I want to talk about the lack of respect for the New England Revolution. I know that this is a very near and dear topic to me, but more importantly, I want to talk about Bobby Shuttleworth. Bobby Shuttleworth was a goalkeeper that came in last season behind Brad Knighton for the Revolution. Now, the Revolution organization is very pro Brad Knighton because he has got more experience in MLS, but Bobby Shuttleworth came out, he proved to the league and to the team that he's very capable, he's physical, he's vocal, he's everything you want in a goalkeeper, and he is one of the best goalkeepers going into this upcoming season. If you need a player for fantasy manager, draft him. He's the real deal, and he might even win goalkeeper of the year this year.
Done.
There you go.
You had a second to spare.
I had a second to breathe. I went 39 seconds without breathing, I feel like. But Bobby Shuttleworth, horribly underrated in my opinion. The man needs more press. He needs positive press, and last season was really kind of a coming-out party for him and the Revolution, obviously. But we'll see kind of what happens with him and everybody else going forward.
What do you think about that new signing from last year, that Jermaine Jones guy?
He's all right. And we'll see. He might have a good future in the league. We'll see what happens to him. But we're going to take a quick break. This is Two Up Front. We'll be right back with more. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Two Up Front, a MLS, general soccer, and all kinds of random shenanigans podcast, hosted by myself, Baxter Colburn, and Simon Provan. We spent a lot of time in the first two segments talking about the CONCACAF Champions League and Montreal Impact really making a name for themselves this preseason. In our second segment, we touched on USL development and the upcoming season for them. They're at 24 teams now, Simon. And then we also talked about the Major League Soccer CBAs and everything they've got going on with them. So a very productive show so far. Remember, you can check us out on Thursdays. We don't have a set time exactly when we want to broadcast. We're hoping to do it sometime between 2 and 2:30. We'll kind of start the show and then kind of go for about an hour, hour and a half, depending on how that all goes. But we want to take a time now to really dive into the East and West conferences here in Major League Soccer and offer our 6 teams that we feel like are going to make the playoffs this year. Obviously, this is a very early prediction, Simon, but at the same time, we both have our select teams that we want to.
Hey, I've got an idea.
Please.
Hey, since you're a Revolution fan, how
Yes.
about you focus on the East?
Oh,
And,
that's
I'll
brilliant.
focus on the West.
That's brilliant because you're a Timbers fan.
There you
It's that I would have been interested to see if we flip flopped and done East West and see where we would have thought each team would have finished. But so for my 6 teams, I'll start at 6 and work my way up. In the 6th spot in the Eastern Conference, I like the New York Red Bulls making that 6th spot. The reason behind that is that I think that the Red Bulls are a good team, but after losing Henry, after losing some of the players they have this offseason, I think they'll make it into the playoffs, but they're going to kind of scrape in like they did last season. Looking up to...
But can I stop you for
Please,
a second?
Please.
How do you think Bradley Wright Phillips is going to do without Henry there?
I think one of two things is going to happen. He's either going to carry on his legacy and continue to be a dominant striker, or he's going to drop out of existence completely. There's going to be no middle ground for him.
All right.
He's either going to be potential MVP candidate again, or people are going to be like, where did he go?
And I think I totally agree with you on that.
It's amazing what having Henry on your team can do for you.
Absolutely.
And I would have killed to have been BWP last year and be able to learn from a guy like Henry for, I think it was 2 seasons. I think he got to learn from him for 2 seasons. Mm-hmm. Looking at the 5th spot, I think Toronto's finally going to make the playoffs, but they're not going to crack the top 4. I think TFC is going to have to fight their way in and finish in that 5th spot. Yes, they've got all that star power, Sebastian Giovinco, Josie Altidore, but more than likely, Simon, they're going to start off the season super hot. That's how they started off last season. They were like, everyone's like, they're the team to beat. They're the best team in MLS. And then there was just a huge drop-off. Obviously, Julio Cesar leaving for the World Cup because he was only there for a half-season loan. I think he only played 8 games for TFC last year. And then they kind of fell apart from there.
Well, and you pretty much had revealed later that Michael Bradley was playing injured ever since the World Cup for the most part. But, man, what a mystery that club is.
It really is. That's the honest truth. That's a great word for him, is a mystery. An interesting team that I feel like might surprise a few people is that the Philadelphia Union might make a push next season.
The question is, are they going to field all goalkeepers?
That is the real question. I think they've got enough that they could probably play like a 7v7 league and have all goalkeepers on their team. They keep signing goalies left and right. It's ridiculous. With the Union, though, I feel like they will jump in with that 4th spot going forward. Sebastian Letou, a very good player, a consistent player, a player that I never like playing against. I would kill to have him on the Revolution, or even on my team, as it were, and as a whole, regardless of whoever it is. He's just a nuisance, and he's such a great playmaker that's very underrated, I feel like.
I'd agree with you on that.
My 3rd team is the expansion team Orlando City FC.
Ooh, that high, huh?
I think so. I honestly think so. Orlando, I think, is going to surprise everybody. As much as Don Garber and the rest of MLS, in terms of people that work in New York, are preaching NYCFC, David Villa, Frank the Tank, as it were, Frank Lampard, when he ever decides to show up, he'll just probably stumble into the back office one day and be like, oh, I'm here. Be like, oh, right, you're still on our team. I don't think NYCFC is going to make the playoffs, Simon. I really don't. Not that I'm fully drinking the OCSC Kool-Aid, the purple Kool-Aid, as it were, but I like their chances. I like their roster, and I feel like they're going to have a great chance of making a name for themselves moving forward. My 2nd team, I think, is going to be the Revolution. The Revolution, I think they did a great job of securing the position that they were in last season. I think that they are a good core group of players that they can move forward and have a good name for themselves. And I just think that they, overall, like you said, they've got that newcomer Jermaine Jones, who's an all right guy, and I think really might help people, play a little better on the team. But Lee Win, we'll see how he does returning for this upcoming season.
I'm very interested to see who your top spot is, because my pick would have been the Revolution.
See, I was fighting back and forth with that because I almost feel like my 1 and 2 are kind of tied, because I didn't want to sound biased and pick New England to finish 1, so you kind of see that my hands are kind of tied in that situation. I think the Columbus Crew and the New England Revolution are going to be that fight for 1 and 2. I mean, I have them technically written down, Crew 1, Revolution 2, but I feel like one of those two are going to do it. I don't think DC United is going to be as good as they were last season. I think DC United was a bit of a fluke, and we saw that when it came playoff time. Now, obviously, anything could happen. I feel like if anybody out of these 6 teams that I have picked between the Crew, the Revs, Orlando, Philly, TFC, and New York, if any of those were to drop, I feel like it would be Philly.
Same here. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, because if I look at it, if I had to redo this and not use Philly, DC obviously would be in there. Chicago Fire is going to be just on that brink. New York, I feel like maybe might be on that brink as well. But Columbus, horribly underrated even last season.
Yeah,
like
yes.
I was scared when I found out that New England had to play Columbus right away. I was like, we might actually lose because Columbus is so physical and just takes every little bit out of you. And that's why when we did beat them by as many goals as we did, that was great. But I'm like, does the Revolution have anything left against a high-powered Red Bulls offense?
Yeah, those are some great picks. I don't think the Union is going to make it.
That was my thought too. Like I'm torn with them because they have a talented midfield, but at the same time, it depends on if they show up or not. That's obviously that's the case for any team. But.
For me, it's the head coach. I'm not sold on Curtin versus Ben Olsen. I think Ben Olsen knows what he's doing more than Jim Curtin does. Now, when it comes to playoff pressure, maybe a different story for Ben Olsen. It's so hard for me to pick TFC. I think they are going to be in good position, but I just don't know if either of those clubs are going to make it ahead of DC United. So, I guess we'll move on to the West.
Please do. What do you got for us?
Well,
in your sixth spot?
First of all, let me preview my preview by saying this one's going to kill me.
Oh.
Not literally,
okay.
but it's going to hurt.
Do I have to find a new co-host for next week?
Not until the season starts.
Oh, okay, there's a lot of rebranding that's going to have to go into this, Simon. So let me know if you're going to like randomly, not show up or.
Yes. Well, you can just call it one up front, then you don't have to find anybody else.
Exactly. Play a 4-5-1 up here. Just be me, lone striker. Anyway, so what do you got for us?
So I think number 6. I'm going to go with the San Jose Earthquakes.
Really?
Yeah, I think Dominic Kinnear knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. He's a great coach. I mean, look at the success he had with San Jose and then / Houston when the club was, I say that acting like you actually were watching the league then. I don't know if you were. He did great with the league. He's one of those few coaches that's been able to transfer his success from what we call MLS 1.0 to MLS 2.0 and now MLS 3.0. So I think the Earthquakes, they got a great coach, and he's gonna lead them there. Number 5, I'm going to go with the Portland Timbers.
Ooh.
I'm going to go with my club. I'm just not sold on them yet.
I would agree. Even unbiased, if I wasn't standing next to you, I would have a hard time putting Portland anywhere inside the top 4.
They won the Western Conference 2 years ago. I think that was a bit of a fluke. And maybe a bit heretical. Heretical, that's the word I'm looking for. I am not sold on Caleb Porter. Great college coach. I think he brought a lot of excitement in his first year when they won the Western Conference. But I am not sold on his tactics. He confuses me with what he's doing in games. So I want the Timbers to make it this year, so I may even be being a bit generous by saying number 5. Number 4, I'm going to go with the Houston Dynamo.
Newcomers to the West.
And let's be honest, great that we got rid of Chivas USA out of the league, but that was the one almost guaranteed win for every team in the West. So,
usually, yeah.
So we take them out, and who do we add? Sporting Kansas City and Houston Dynamo. How much more difficult can that conference be? And then the East gets 2 expansion teams. So
I'm curious to know how your top 3 is going to stack up now that you have failed to mention 4 or 5 very talented clubs. So continue, please.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know where your 3 spots you have left.
I'll temper this by saying I don't think the Rapids are going to make the playoffs again.
They're a young, talented team, and Deshaun Brown is a very exciting young product for the Jamaican national team. But You're right, there's still too many missing pieces.
And there's another thing, too. Pablo Mastroeni, great player, did great with the U.S. national team. I just don't think he's manager material.
Did you see his mustache at the MLS Super Draft?
I did not. Yes, I did. Yes.
Oh,
so I give him kudos for that.
He knows how to grow a mustache, but build a soccer team, he's got a little more work on that, Pablo.
All right, so number 3. This is a tough one, but I'm going to go with FC Dallas, and may flip Dallas with the Dynamo.
Okay.
All right.
I'm already.
Oh no, you know what? No, I'm sorry. No. I don't think Dallas is going to make it.
Oh.
That's going to be. Who did I have there? Sporting Kansas City.
I was going to say.
See, this makes it difficult when you got all these teams.
You've got all these powerhouses, yeah. I totally understand that.
All right, number 2, I'm going to go with the Galaxy.
Oh, okay.
Again, Bruce Arena knows how to manage games in this league. I think they're going to do what they usually do. They're going to start out slow, and then they're going to come on strong.
Yep.
So you know who that leaves for number one. And
Ooh.
this is why this is killing me.
I know.
You know what? You go ahead and say it.
Okay. It's obviously that you're picking the Vancouver Whitecaps.
Oh, man. Yeah. No.
No?
No, it's the other Cascadia team.
Oh.
It's the Seattle Sounders.
Ugh, how much did that hurt you to say?
Well, honestly, not too much. Because as much,
it
you know,
makes
I'm a
sense.
Timbers fan, but they're a stacked team. They did great last year. This may be the year that they win the MLS Cup as well.
Really?
Yes.
I don't know how many years Ziggy Schmidt has left in him, so I mean that kind of makes sense that if they're going to win it, they've got a talented team. Yeah, they lost DeAndre Yedlin to Tottenham, but at the same time, they still have a very good offense. Obafemi Martins, Clinton Dempsey, Lamar Nagel. You go through that team, Chad Marshall on defense, Stephen Fry at goalie. You can go on and on and on with all those players.
Well, and they sold DeAndre Yedlin for $4 million, which means they get a good chunk of that change.
Oh, yeah.
So they've got money that they can spend.
Yes. Yep, I will agree with that. I will make one correction to mine. The more I've thought about it, the more foolish I realize. The Philadelphia Union are not going to make the playoffs. I think D.C. is going to take that fourth spot in complete honesty. As soon as I said Philly, I was like, did I really mean that? And like I thought about it more as you were talking, and I'm like, it doesn't realistically make sense. Now, I will ask you why you don't think Vancouver or RSL make the playoffs in the West.
Well, now you're going to have to make me correct stuff here.
Well, I'm just curious because when you said San Jose
Yeah.
and then realized even that FC Dallas, as good as they were last season, I'm really curious to know why.
Part of it is I want to see the Timbers make it, so I'm
That's a fair thing. No, that's perfectly fair. They've got a decent
Yeah.
team, but like you said, there's just some questions with Caleb Porter as well.
Yeah, you know, there's a question mark actually with Houston. Owen Coyle coming in to manage the team.
Yeah, how is a new coach going to work
Right,
out?
so that's that one that has a question mark that maybe FC Dallas goes there instead. Vancouver, I think they're going to be fighting for 5 or 6. I do. For me, it just still comes down to experience. You know, they don't have Jay Demerit this year. He's hung up the boots, if I remember that right.
He did,
Yeah.
yep.
So he was a big leader there. Granted, he didn't play a whole lot because of his injuries, but
he was still a great off-the-field leader as
Right,
well. Even though he
right.
didn't play a lot, he still really helped motivate the guys. I do want to know your opinion about Darian Maddox, though. The young forward for Vancouver. He's a very talented guy. He's kind of similar to a Desjardins Brown, to kind of give you that idea. He's kind of the focal point of that attack, but also Pedro Morales as well. He was the newcomer of the year last year, I believe.
That's
in
true.
MLS.
Yeah.
A very talented guy. A lot of people are saying to really buy high on him because he's a very like I said, he's very talented. He's a dynamic midfielder, and if any reason that Vancouver makes the playoffs, it would be because of his production.
And I guess that's what it is. I don't know if they can put all the pieces together yet. That's what
that
that's
makes
what it
sense.
comes down
and
to
that's
for a
why
lot
I
of
was
these.
confused by your San Jose pick as well.
Well, that truly comes down to the manager. It really does. They've got almost a new team this year, but Dominic Kinnear, he can work wonders, and I think he can get the team there.
And now I feel like we might have a lot of people upset with us because Chicago has been on a spending spree this offseason. They've brought in, I think the last time I looked, it was 9 new players, something of that nature.
Yes,
They've spent
yeah.
a lot of money this year, and I'm really kind of curious to know where they came from. Maybe that's why the league's $100 million in debt,
Well,
because they're...
listen, they have a DP that was playing in the second division in one of the Norwegian leagues. Explain that to me.
Exactly. I can't, because I don't understand why they're worthy of a DP title, and a guy like Juan Agudalo's not.
Exactly.
But anyway.
Well, Agudalo, though, I can kind of understand. He hasn't played for 6 months.
I think they called it a young DP contract because he's too young to give a full-fledged deal. But even at the same time, how do you DP a second-tier Norwegian guy when I didn't even know Norwegian had a second league?
Yeah, yep, they do. And I believe the player, I believe he's from Africa, if I remember reading it correctly, but that's where he was playing. And even then, it wasn't like he was tearing up the league. So, you know, I could see, for example, somebody in the championship puts in 30 goals, and then he signs over at MLS, and, you know.
And people thought that Aaron Johansson might do that too, the U.S. national team forward, because
Sure.
he did such a great job. Even Josie Altidore for a while too went out and scored 20-some goals over in I can't remember the name of the league now. Is it that?
Over in the
Iceland?
Netherlands.
Netherlands, that's where it
Netherlands,
was. Yeah, he has a fantastic season. Same with Aaron
Eredivisie.
Yes, yep. And everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, he must be really good." Goes to England, obviously not, because it's a totally different thing.
But I'm going to temper that. I
Please.
tweeted this out last week. So Sunderland gets shut out again. They've been shut out plenty of times. So was it really Josie, or was it Poyet not knowing how to manage a team?
Probably
and
a
the
little
players
of each.
he has.
But I'm gonna poke the bear for a minute because Josie Altidore is one of the hottest topics in U.S. soccer. You can find a U.S. soccer team fan and be like, let's talk about Josie Altidore for 20 minutes, and you'll be there for 5 hours because there's just so much you can talk about with Josie Altidore. And when he came back to MLS, I was in support of it. And now I've heard so much backlash from people saying, stupid idea, worst idea he ever could have made. Where do you stand on Josie coming back to MLS?
It's a great question. I've got mixed feelings about it. I would have liked to have seen him stayed over there. He had offers apparently from teams in France, in Germany. I would have liked to have seen him stay and try to break into one of those teams. Because let's face it, the one thing I agree with Klinsmann on, if you can get to a team that plays Champions League soccer over in Europe, go for it. At the same time, I'm glad he's over here because the most important thing for a player is to get game time, is to be playing. There's no point in sitting on a bench and sitting on a bench and sitting on a bench. You don't go to Manchester United to say, hey, yeah, I'm at Manchester United, and then just sit on the bench. That does no good for you. It does no good for your national team.
Exactly. Yes, you might be adding some depth to the roster, but you're not a big-time player like Josie is for the U.S., and go sit on the bench. Like, if he were to ride the bench at TFC, people would be like, why is he here?
Exactly.
Jurgen Klinsmann would be going like, see, I told you.
But then you look at the World Cup, right?
Yeah.
The goal against Ghana.
Yep.
It was 3 MLS players that made that goal happen.
Yeah, and even the World Cup against, I think it was Belgium as well. Graham Zusi into the middle, and then somebody else hit it. No, it was Yedlin to Zusi, Zusi to Dempsey, and off Dempsey's chest, I think he chested it into the goal or something. But MLS
that was Ghana. I believe wasn't that Ghana?
I thought that was Belgium.
No, Belgium. Julian Green scored.
Yeah, but didn't we score twice? Oh no, I'm sorry. Thinking
Portugal.
Portugal, that's the game I'm thinking of. I'm like, when did we score more than one goal? I was like, Portugal, that's where we scored. That was what it was. But even still, the MLS all over the place in the World Cup squad, and I think that the U.S. did benefit because of that. Now that you've got guys like Josie and Michael Bradley on the same team, I'm hoping that Jurgen Klinsmann sitting in his office somewhere saying, please, dear Lord, let them build more chemistry so they can actually do something together, because we've seen them kind of struggle with chemistry. If they both stay healthy all season, Michael Bradley doesn't have any reoccurring injuries, Josie doesn't have the phantom leg pull that he had in the World Cup, who knows what might happen for the U.S.? And I think that's why it was a great idea that Josie, the top striker of U.S., and Michael Bradley, probably the top midfielder of the U.S., are now on the same team.
Yes, and now it's a matter of Klinsmann playing them correctly.
Exactly. That's obviously what it all comes down to at the end of the day. Now, talking about the U.S. national team, there is a saying that goes along with that, saying, I believe. Now, a segment that we want to do as well on the show, depending on how it's well received, is called I Believe. Right. Now, the way that kind of works is we will say, I believe that, not we will win, which of course obviously is helpful. We make a statement saying, I believe, for example, I believe that MLS will go beyond, will expand to 26 teams, just as an example. Obviously, what we have to actually say is a little different than that, but that kind of gives you an idea.
Yeah.
So, would you like to go first, or would you like me to go
first?
I'll
have you go first, because mine had to change since the players didn't strike.
Fair enough.
That's all I'll say.
Fair enough. That's true. Yeah, exactly. So, for my I believe that TFC will make it to the Eastern Conference Championship.
Wow.
I don't know if they'll win or not. Call. No, but I believe that TFC will make it to the Eastern Conference Championship.
And I don't think it's too far-fetched saying that.
Even though I have them at 5th.
Sure.
I think that they will take the long road there, but I feel like they have the talent this year, especially if Sebastian Giovinco, who's had a fantastic preseason, really continues to contribute. You've got him with Michael Bradley, you've got Josie Altidore, you've got some of those other young players running around. This could be a very interesting and great year. I think even better than the team they had going into last season.
Yeah, I mean, it should be. Everything on paper says it should be.
Exactly. And obviously games aren't won on paper, as we both know from playing the game and following the game, but TFC, I believe that they will make it to the Eastern Conference Championship.
All right. Well, mine's not going to be so bold, but I'm going to stay with that spirit of finals. I believe the Montreal Impact will make it to the final of the CONCACAF Champions League.
Okay.
Can I add one more thing in
Please.
there? I also believe Club America from Mexico will make it, and then Montreal's going to get destroyed.
Probably, unfortunately, which would not be good to see. But at the same time, even if they make it, that's still one small step for humanity, as it were, one giant step for MLS. Montreal Impact, we support you. You'll never hear us say that again, especially once the regular season starts.
Unless it's Champions League again
Unless
next
it's
year.
Champions League, we will be like, please go Montreal. And maybe our teams will make it one day, too, and actually last past the first round.
Yeah, that's, if I can just quickly.
Please.
So that was one of the biggest things I did not understand about Caleb Porter. And I know many Timbers fans were so confused. Last season, going at the end of the MLS season, they needed Vancouver to lose in order for them to get into the playoffs. Granted, they needed to win. At the same time, they were playing Champions League ball. If they won their last game in the group, they would have not only won their group, they would have been the number 1 seed in the Champions League playoffs. So all of us fans are thinking, go for the sure thing. Go for Champions League. Well, Porter did the opposite. So he rested a bunch of players. They ended up losing their Champions League game, so they were done with Champions League. They did win their MLS game, but then so did Vancouver. So then their season was completely done. So they very well could have been in the quarterfinals.
It's very true. You never know with Portland and Caleb Porter's coaching tactics, like you called into question during your Western Conference preview. Simon, as we get ready to close out the show, we are going to make our predictions for the first week of MLS, since it is officially going to happen.
Yes, that's right.
So might as well give the good people our thoughts. So opening night, tomorrow night, LA Galaxy, Chicago Fire. It's an obvious pick, at least in my opinion. I'm taking the Galaxy.
I got the Galaxy as well.
Galaxy all the way. All right. On Saturday, DC United versus the Montreal Impact. A little
fun.
bit of irony, in all honesty. The game is at RFK Stadium, though.
It is. I'm actually going to pick DC United.
Okay.
Not to balance out my Montreal stuff.
Of course not.
But I think Montreal will still be a bit tired from the high that they had with Champions League, and I'm going to go with DC.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that as well. DC just kind of seems like the clear favorite, and the Impact are going to just be too tired, probably from all the partying. Philly and Colorado. Who do you got?
Oh, man, this is a tough one as well. I'm going to go with Philadelphia, though. I think we'll see the first, or that'll be the second, right? No, Philadelphia's from the East, so that would be the first Eastern Conference victory we'd see over the West this year.
Yep. I'm going to have to take Colorado.
All right.
I'm a closet Colorado fan.
You are?
I am.
Okay.
I've always supported that team just in a small, quiet
Here's
way.
what I'll say. They got
Please.
a sweet-looking stadium.
They really do. I really want to get out there one of these days. All right, Vancouver and TFC.
I'm going to go with TFC on this one.
Okay, the game is at Vancouver at BC Palace.
Yeah.
Just a place, just a gorgeous stadium.
It is, and they draw well. But I'm still going to go with TFC.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that as well.
Okay.
I don't see why they wouldn't win that game opening day. Houston and Columbus.
I think we're going to pick the same on this.
Probably.
Maybe not. But I'm
Well-
going to go with Columbus.
Yep, that's who I was going with as well.
I'm kind of regretting my Dynamo pick making the playoffs.
We won't hold it against you. Unless they don't make the playoffs. Then I'll ridicule you on the air. I'm kidding. I would never do that. FC Dallas and San Jose?
I'm going with a draw.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. I like FC Dallas winning this game. You've got a draw on that one. Portland and RSL?
You know you want me to pick Portland. I in all honesty, I lean more towards a draw in this one as well. But it's at Portland, so I am going to pick the Timbers.
Okay.
They're at home.
It makes sense.
Of course, they didn't play great at home last season, but I'm gonna go with
Timbers
them.
Army will be there in full support,
That's
though.
right.
I've got to take Portland as well in that game, in all
All right.
honesty. RSL is not the same.
Oh, that makes me feel a little better.
Exactly. You're not crazy, I promise. And that is, I believe that's it for opening weekend. New England, I guess, doesn't play this week. When does Orlando play? I feel like I should know this. Our apologies. I feel like I should know this. I'm looking at the matches.
Our websites are a little slow here. So
That's true.
Yes, Orlando, New York City is on Sunday, and Sporting Kansas City and
Oh,
Red
yeah,
Bulls
there
are
we go.
Sunday.
Yeah, but all just showed up. It finally refreshed, and it was like, boom, there it is. Okay, I was going to say, I feel like I'm missing some big games. 3 big games. Sunday's the day to watch if you're going to watch any day of MLS. Orlando, NYCFC. Who you got?
I'm going to go with Orlando. They filled the bowl. They got Kaka playing. Yeah, Orlando.
Yep, same for me. Orlando is definitely my second favorite team now in the East. Sporting KC and New York Red Bulls.
I'm so curious about how the Red Bulls are going to be. New manager.
Post
fans
Henry.
are not happy. Yeah, so I'm going to go with Sporting on this
Yep,
one.
I'm going to have to agree with you on Sporting. And then Seattle, New England.
Sorry, bud. picking Seattle.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to as
Oh,
well.
you do?
You can't win in CenturyLink Field. Like opening day, I feel like New England probably isn't gonna have Jermaine Jones, and they're probably not gonna have Lee Wynn as well, based off of his injuries going on right now. So we'll kind of see what happens with that. But I think New England will make it interesting. But Seattle home, 12th man, all that jazz.
First game of the season.
Opening day, Seattle does opening day really well,
Yes.
and they're probably gonna put a hurting. I'm probably gonna go on a limb and say 3-1 Seattle is my prediction.
Wow. Yeah.
As much as it pains me to say that, but New England is just a slow team, and they didn't show a very good chemistry in the preseason either.
Well, they didn't. Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Although, the thing I will say is, man, it was amazing when Jermaine Jones came. The chemistry of that team just totally solidified last season. That's why I thought you'd pick them as first in the East for this year. So we'll see if that carries over.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. Well, it's been I can't believe it's already been 70 minutes. I swear we were just trying to figure out how the heck to work all this equipment, and then now here we are. So it's been a fun edition of our first 2 Upfront Soccer show. Remember to like us on Facebook, 2 Upfront. You can also follow us on Twitter. Where, Simon?
At 2 Upfront Soccer, also at Baxter Colburn, and at Simon Provan.
Yes, sir. You can find us there. We'll be tweeting all things MLS, especially with opening weekend right around the corner. I'm sure we'll have some raw reaction about our favorite teams, as well as other news as well. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully we'll see you all again next Thursday. Simon, any final thoughts?
No, thanks for listening, folks. We're going to go on an awesome ride.
Oh, yeah. This has been another edition of 2 Upfront. For Simon Provan, I'm Baxter Colburn. We'll see you all next week. Enjoy opening weekend.